Another gloriously muggy morning here in Florida. Man, been a lot of talk lately about our new incoming Postmaster General. I've seen a couple of channels on YouTube every day, over the top headlines and, video titles about how very few people are going to survive what's coming and all this, and how the new Postmaster General is just all he cares about are the numbers and the metrics and all of that, and talking about managers and supervisors that aren't performing and hitting the numbers going to be out of a job. And the other thing that everybody's talking about, though, is uniforms, and how this guy, back when he was running waste management or whatever, had these people who, just basically, as everybody says, they're just garbage men, and still he wanted them to have their shirts tucked in and everything pressed, and putting up a certain image for the company. Yeah, I've got one guy I work with that every day he's talking about that, and he said they were just garbage men, and he was like, all this stuff. But image is pretty important. One of the other older guys that I work with was talking to me a while back, and talking about some of these carriers we have these days, especially some of the CCAs and everybody. And he's like, man, can you believe the way these people go out here looking? Aside from the fact that performance-wise, we'll be back at the office, and he'll be like, look at this parking lot, man. Where are all these people at? We cased 2 routes, went out and did our routes, so we're back, and we come back and the parking lot's empty. What are these people doing out there on the street all day? But in addition to that, the way these people come to work looking, I see people out there delivering mail sometimes, not just like in our office, but I go out, if I'm out driving around other places, you might see somebody out carrying mail. Some of these people look like they're, just got kicked off the roadie crew for a reggae band or something, and music blasting real loud everywhere, and the image that they're putting forth for the Postal Service is not good, and you can kind of look at it as just a sign of the times. It's the effort to be more inclusive. You not have all the letter carriers out walking around looking like, buttoned up, old white guys that just got out of the military or something. And trying to be a more inclusive workforce, and to, even things like tattoos and stuff like that, some of the stuff you see. And most companies these days have relaxed their standards a lot when it comes to appearance. The Postal Service, though, does have regulations about, your uniforms and what you're supposed to be wearing. And, personally, I always wear these shirt jackets anymore. And they're just a lot looser and more comfortable when you're out walking around in the heat and everything. Plus, I discovered a long, long time ago when I first started, back when everybody got their checks in those little shrink-wrapped, red boxes, that those things would fit perfectly in the pocket of my shirt jack. So I could stick a couple of those in my pocket. If I had little spurs or something that I needed to carry, I just shove those in my pocket and take off. So convenient. The problem is, of course, these hampers that we've got. You bend over to pull your packages out of the hamper or something, you got to watch hooking those pockets on the bolts and stuff on there, or else you just instantly rip them. I was in Arby's one time having lunch a couple years back, and I took my scanner in with me, keep an eye on the time, and had my scanner, I popped it in my pocket before I stood up from the table, and when I stood up, I kind of leaned over, and my scanner hooked on the edge of the table and ripped my pocket. So you got to be careful with them. But the other shirts that we wear, you're supposed to be wearing them tucked in, you know. And then everybody wants to wear them hanging out, which is, as we all know, not what you're supposed to be doing in terms of the uniform policy. There are certain things you're supposed to be wearing like this and like that. Even with those shirt jacks, you know, if you wear another jacket, you know, you're supposed to have something that's longer than that, you know, not have that hanging out from underneath it. It's very hard to follow sometimes, depending on the weather conditions and all of that, doing everything precisely correct, especially with the very limited allowance they give you. I just renewed mine the other day. I called the uniform lady up. It was the 19th on a Monday, and she's like, "Oh wow, you had it timed, right?" That's because my thing renewed on the 17th, and I knew it was renewing sometime in May, and I was seriously in need of a new pair of boots because the soles on my other ones were just trashed. And the last time I was out walking around in the rain and totally soaked, I pulled the old insoles out of them and just threw those away and put some other ones in there that weren't really thick enough, and my feet were kind of hurting. And go out walking around, the edge of the soles were all worn away. And, you know, your foot, the way you walk, your foot rolling over. And so I was desperately in need of a new pair of boots. So I'd been keeping an eye on when my allowance renewed. But I unfortunately missed out on I forget how much is supposed to go up now, the uniform allowance under the new contract. But she said I just missed it because the cutoff date was for people that renewed on the 21st, and mine renewed on the 17th, so I didn't get that. But I got some new shirts and stuff. Wore one yesterday. First time I wore it, end up with a little ink spot. And, you know, I had my pen down in that little pen part of the shirt jacket, or the shirt pocket, and you know, get a little bit of ink from the end of the pen. I don't know if like the end of the pen, if it got accidentally pressed the button and it came out, and there I got a little dot of ink already. A few years back I got some new uniforms, and I was a T6 at the time on this one really long walking route, you know, like 12 miles or something of walking, really long route. And man, I got halfway through the day out there sweating in the heat, and you could see like carrying the mail up against my body, had these multicolor stains already on the very first day from the edges of the magazines and all that ink getting in the shirt. As soon as you wear those things one day, if you're actually out there doing any work, you know, they start getting stained and everything. It's impossible to keep a letter carrier uniform spotless. It's an impossibility I've discovered through the years. It would be nice to think you could, but if you're actually working and out there actually carrying mail instead of just driving a truck around, sticking your arm out the window and stuff, you're going to get dirty. I told this one carrier when I was out helping out on some route inspections a few weeks back, you know, at this other office, and they had some heavy packages, and the clerk came wheeling them over on a dock truck, and I thought, wow, that's great. It was a little bigger facility than where I work, but I told him at our office, you know, if you get a heavy package, the clerks, you know, there's something they don't want to throw in your hamper, they just lay it on the floor and push it over to your case and get it all filthy. And then by the time you get that package loaded in the truck or carried up to somebody's door, then your shirt's all filthy. It's so hard to try and keep a uniform looking spotless. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if they start wanting stain-free uniforms and everything. I don't know how possible that is. But we'll see how crazy things get. The thing is, though, we're supposed to go to work looking respectable and, you know, having a good image for the post office. You know, we got everybody out walking around delivering mail just looking sloppy and acting like they don't care what they look like and not having any pride in the postal service or their appearance. It's a bad thing for the post office. So I don't think we can freak out too bad about having someone who's going to enforce that stuff. It's kind of like Clint Eastwood said in Heartbreak Ridge, you start looking like Marines, you'll start acting like Marines, you know? That's kind of, you know, some of us older guys kind of feel like that with the post office sometimes. If these people maybe tried to take a little bit of pride in looking like they work for the Postal Service and like they care one way or the other about our image, that maybe, it would improve their actions too. Maybe they would start working like they cared about that. But all that stuff is something that I guess we're going to see getting focused on a little more. The thing is, the way the post office is right now, it's been getting this way for a long time. Back in the day, everybody used the post office for everything. Everybody had used first class mail for stuff. All the businesses sent out the bills, first class mail, and we were making money, and those days are gone. Everybody does everything online. The only mail we have is like bulk rate business mail and parcels. And you got some priority stuff and things like that. But it's just not like it used to be. And we have to understand that they're going to focus more and more and more on having things done the way they're supposed to be and watching those numbers. They already do it with the scanners and every second of our time, and making sure that we don't spend too long sitting around in one spot doing nothing. And obviously people complain about it. Even if you're not doing anything wrong, it's annoying, especially for some of us older people who come from a day when you weren't walking around with people tracking your every minute. Back in the day, we didn't even have cell phones or anything, so we didn't have Google and everybody tracking us every minute of every day. Everybody else knows where we go. If your employer is paying you money, you really can't complain about them wanting to know what you're doing. Any other job, you've got a supervisor watching what you're doing and saying, hey, go do this, go do that. So it's kind of silly for us to expect to not be supervised or whatever. But it was kind of nice back in the day. As long as you were doing your job and getting things done on time and being a good worker, people didn't really mess with you. And now you've got people that don't even know you in another city or state saying, well, why did this person spend 3 seconds doing this or whatever, And it's just to keep the pressure on and let us know they're watching. I know some people don't care what my opinion is on that, considering the amount of time I spent working as an acting supervisor myself. And they'll just say, oh, you're a company man or whatever. But I am primarily a letter carrier. In fact, that is what I am. And I've spent a long, long time doing it. And this August will be 27 years. I'll be 62 this year. At my age, and when you've already been doing it for over a quarter of a century, there are a lot of things that make you feel like maybe it's time to hang it up. But when you work for somebody, you have to expect that they're going to want you to do your job and not just be screwing around, wasting time. But I know a lot of people are fearful about what's coming. But the whole uniform thing, it's going to be interesting to see. It is impossible to keep a postal uniform clean if you're doing any kind of work. If you're just sitting around, I don't know. These LLVs we have, even if you're not out walking around carrying mail, you're going to get stained from the seat belts, the filthy seats, and just the fact that the trucks aren't really kept clean and things like that. You get out walking around, first time you wear your satchel, unless you put a new strap on it every day, you're going to get that stain over your shoulder from the satchel. Unless you get a new uniform allowance every couple of months, pretty hard to stay looking spick and span. But as a lot of people are saying, he expected garbage men to look spick and span, so who knows what will happen. Just thinking about that yesterday as I was walking around getting the initial stains on my new uniform, Gonna be fun, see what happens. The Postal Service, though, we need to do something as far as, I don't know, making the future a friendly place for the Postal Service. and the future is not going to change for us. So that means we're going to have to change for the future. And I saw this guy, JH or whoever, the other day was talking about a quote from our incoming PMG, talking about people who are afraid of change are usually, probably because they have been getting away with something, and talking about what a horrible attitude that was. But you know what? It's often true. It's very often true. People don't like to see things being changed because, it's like any job. You've been getting away with shit. You've been slacking or whatever. And then you get a new manager who comes in and expects you to keep working, stay busy all day. People don't like that. And unfortunately, any business today, you're going to have to stay busy, especially with the things that are happening in the economy. Even some of these businesses where, in the tech industry, where they prided themselves on everybody just going in and hanging out and being like a big game room type of atmosphere, and thinking that was a more productive way to do things. You see a lot of that stuff going away as companies realize, well, shit, we don't have money to waste anymore, and we have to make a profit. So that's just the way of the world. But anyways, just thinking about my uniforms, wondering how long they'll stay clean.